Did you ever think of the functions your TV remote does for you? It allows you to make changes to your TV. You can think of the DOM like a TV remote that lets you change the web page content on the screen. It even allows you to replace only certain parts of the page, such as an image or the heading, or both. A remote, however, has certain limitations. You can only change the channel, contrast, brightness, and volume. The DOM gives you much finer-grained control than a TV remote ever could. For example, imagine you can change what characters in a TV movie look like with a few simple commands while the movie is playing. The DOM allows you to change properties of objects on a web page. You can think of the DOM as a superpower remote for websites. It gives developers power in how they can manipulate and update web pages. The DOM is in the form of a JavaScript object with nested objects for different parts of the page. These objects have nested objects of their own until the entire HTML file is mapped out in what looks like a tree structure. The DOM is the model of the HTML file saved as a JavaScript object in your browser's memory. The browser automatically builds the DOM for every web page that it downloads. For example, if you type a URL into your browser's address bar, the browser will fetch the web page that exists on this domain. If the browser connects to the server and it allows the browser to download the page, it will receive all the HTML code and save it in its memory. The browser will then show the downloaded page. It will also build that web page's DOM, a model of the HTML document your browser has just downloaded. As a developer, you can interact with the page's DOM to make changes to the web page. To interact with the DOM, you can use the Elements tab inside the browser's DevTools. You get to the DevTools by right-clicking anywhere in a browser window and then by clicking Inspect. The Elements tab allows you to interact with the DOM of the currently active web page using a graphical user interface, also known as a GUI. The browser also allows you to interact with the DOM using JavaScript. To do this, you should click the Console tab in the browser's DevTools. You can focus on the console panel by pressing the Escape key on your keyboard. Once done, you can start typing JavaScript commands to view and manipulate the DOM. This is similar to how you interact with the DOM using the Elements panel, only this time you're using code to do it. The entire DOM object is saved inside the document variable and accessible via the console. Now let me demonstrate how DOM manipulation works. Using the document object model allows us to manipulate live websites. For example, I've opened my browser and loaded the example.com webpage from the internet. I want to add a heading 2 HTML element to this webpage using the DOM. Once again, I have the developer tools open in the window to the right, and the console tab is active. It's important to remember that any changes I make to the DOM are relative to my browser's local copy of the web page. I'm not updating the content of the live website, so don't worry, you are not going to break it. If I reload the web page, all changes I make to the DOM will be lost, as it will reset to the page that was downloaded from the server. Okay, so in order to create my heading 2, I need to update the document object. To do this, I type document dot and then the method createElement. Then, inside the open and close parenthesis, I type the name of the HTML element that I want to create, which is wrapped around single quotes. What I am doing here is passing the tag names as a JavaScript string. Finally, I'm going to assign this statement to a const variable. So, I type const h2 and then the assignment operator. I press enter, and now I have successfully built my h2 element. You may notice that the web page on the left has not been updated with the heading 2. This is because although I now have a h2 element saved in JavaScript's memory, I still need to attach it to the DOM structure. Currently, it's not a part of the document object. Additionally, my h2 element also needs some text. Without it, even after adding the h2 element to the document, there would not be a visible change on the page because the added h2 element although being a part of the DOM, would have no text inside. In other words, it would be blank. Let's fix these two issues now. First, I'll make some updates to my h2 element. I'll add some attributes and some text using the innerText method. I can run this on my h2 variable. I type h2.innerText and then assign a string with a value of "this is an h2 heading." Next, I want my heading2 element to have an ID and a class HTML attribute. To do this, I need to use the setAttribute method. So I type h2.setAttribute, which takes two parameters. The first one is the attribute's name, which is ID, and then the value of the attribute. For this example, I'll name it subheading and press enter. Notice that inside the parenthesis, the name and the value are wrapped in single quotes and separated by a comma. Next, I need to use the setAttribute method again, this time for the class attribute. I've pasted the same line of code, and now I just need to change the word ID to class. And for the value, I change this to secondary and press enter. Finally, I'm ready to append my h2 object to the DOM. First, I can test that my code is correct by typing h2 and noticing the HTML structure's output. This looks good to me, so let's add it to the DOM. I need to run the appendChild method on the document body to do this. So now I type document.body.appendChild, and inside the parenthesis, I place my HTML structure stored in the variable h2. Success! My object is appended to the body of this web page, and the heading2 text displays in the browser. You should now be able to explain the basics of DOM manipulation and use some of the most common DOM manipulation methods.